Okay, I'm gonna hold your hand when I tell you this, okay? The man in this movie, he's mine, thank you very much. You guys can have Pearl, okay? That's fair trade, right? And yes, he is also Superman. To be fair, the only person who could deal with Pearl would probably have to be a superhuman like him. And you're about to see what I mean very shortly. Like, Farquaad shortly. This movie's titular character is a farm girl named Pearl who, lives on a farm. Way back in 1918, way out in the isolated countryside, with her German immigrant parents. Her mother a strict, cold, stern woman, to say the least, and her father infirmed and actually paralyzed. But despite her current living condition and humble social status, Pearl over here has big dreams of one day becoming famous, of ditching the rural farm life and chores and responsibilities and quotidian and becoming an absolute star. A world-renowned actress or dancer, anything of the sort. Because Pearl believes she is very special and made for the spotlight. Born for the spotlight. Just like my very glam boys here today. But along with those hints of a grandiose type of narcissism, Pearl also lays claim to a dark side of sorts, exhibited by her randomly and spontaneously pitchforking a goose on their farm, whoosh, before feeding it to her crocodile buddy that lives on the lake on their property, named Theta. And I say buddy because crocodiles can never be your friends. They have no souls. They are pure, unadulterated evil. Anyway, her very strict, scary German mom in no way supports Pearl's dreams of grandeur and fame and wealth and fortune, all the good stuff. Calling all her fancies and dreams of stardom selfishness. Telling her that instead, her focus should be on upkeeping their farm, which is their livelihood, because this is during war times, and food rations are low, and since Pearl's father is paralyzed, apparently from a sickness he got, on top of having to upkeep the farm and all the chores and all that fun stuff that comes with that, Pearl and her mother also have to heavily take care of her father, his every need, because he's completely paralyzed, and therefore Pearl is expected to give him a lot of help. And since this is taking place during the war, Pearl's husband, Howard, he is out on active service, far away from home, and Pearl seems to harbor not only some sadness for that, but some resentment that he's not there and that he's left her there, even though Mans has got to go serve. Have you heard of the draft? But all in all, Pearl's life is pretty grim and depressing, and she absolutely hates it, serving as a little bit of an escape. Pearl heads out on her bike to the nearest town, which kind of seems pretty far away for a bike. Maybe Pearl should try an electric scooter. Be like one of the cool kids here. Heading into town to get some more of her father's medicine from the pharmacy, as well as a little quick detour to the town picture show or theater, because, why not? And by the way, the reason they're wearing face coverings or masks is because this is the time of a resurgence of the Spanish flu, as if anything else could go wrong at this point. Anyway, Pearl stops in for a quick showing of a black and white ancient film, featuring girls dancing their heart out on a stage, which is, Pearl's absolute dream. And Pearl's just watching from the audience with such earnest and longing, like, that should be me. And after the brief showing or film or picture is finished, Pearl is approached by Superman, aka the Projectionist, who also doesn't have a movie in this name. Oh, fuck. Who also doesn't have a name in this movie, so we're just gonna call him David. Because, that's the actor's name. I didn't just pick that off the top of my head. And not only is he, Superman, he's also like, wow. Wow. Anyway, Pearl is a tad wary at first, but they get into a brief conversation. David eventually gifting her with a negative from the viewing she just watched of all the girls dancing and living out Pearl's dream, after she mentions to him that becoming a star or a dancer is a massive dream of hers. And although Pearl does mention early on that she has a husband that's out in the war, let's be honest, it's gotta be a little hard to remember you're married when you're talking to him. On the bike ride home, that little splice of negative which she tucks in her overall pocket, it blows out into the surrounding cornfield. Pearl hurriedly stopping to search for it, to no avail, instead coming across the field's scarecrow. She tears the scarecrow down from the post and initiates a kind of spur-of-the-moment vivacious waltz with said scarecrow, followed by a smooch, among other questionable things that the scarecrow did not consent to. So once Pearl's got that out of her system, Pearl hits the open road again, returning to her wonderfully, perfectly dismal crap life. Still wearing the scarecrow's hat. Her mother, of course, is not too happy that Pearl took so long, and so because of the flu and because the mother is very careful about it, she immediately instructs Pearl to go and shower off all the town germs, and then go and change her father's diaper. Yippee! Pearl does just that and ends up bathing in front of her father. Just because he's paralyzed, it doesn't mean he's not mentally cognizant, right? And while she's bathing in front of her dad, Pearl gives into one of her dark compulsions of sorts, squeezing her hand around his throat and being met only by his expected unresponsiveness because he can't do anything. Poor guy. And after a dinner that's unfortunately cut short for Pearl, Pearl's mother denying her a meal after discovering that Pearl spent more in town than she was allowed, to watch that film. Pearl heads up to bed, likely very starving, her nighttime prayer an absolute plea to God that she can become a star so she can get far away from here. The next morning, while Pearl is out milking the cows, Pearl's sister-in-law Mitzi and Mitzi's mother, they pay the farm a visit, Mitzi's brother being Howard, obviously, stopping by to gift them with a roasted pig from their own farm, which you would think to be an absolute godsend during the wartime and the limited wartime food supply. But Pearl's mother is too proud and says she doesn't accept charity, so it's just left on the porch. A perfectly good pig that died for naught. Mitzi's secretly telling Pearl that there's actually a dance audition coming up that Saturday for a Christmas chorus line, where they're putting together a dance troupe that will be touring 7 different cities before the year's end. And you can just see the stars lighting up Pearl's eyes, because this is an absolute dream come true. So, come Saturday, Mitzi and Pearl plan to secretly sneak out and to attend said audition. And Pearl is thrilled. A little while later, while Pearl's mother is out tending the garden, Pearl sneaks up to the attic to get one of her mom's old dresses that are apparently off limits. And later that night, she puts it on and gets herself all primped up, and she sneaks out of the house and bikes back to the town to David, paying him a late-night surprise visit. And though it is pretty late in the night, he's still there because he apparently lives in the back room of the picture show or of the theater, which honestly, free rent, count me in. Pearl tells David of the upcoming, dance audition, which, being a fan of the arts in general himself, he's in support of, assuaging some of her nerves and apprehensions about it. And then he offers to show her a picture, or a film, for free, ultimately selecting one that apparently no one has seen before. Which just turns out to be a vintage, first of its kind, pretty much porno. So Superman's freaky as hell. And Pearl's over here a little taken aback and not 100% sure how she's supposed to feel about it. Pearl then expresses to him her ache and her yearning to get away from her life and that her life sucks and is so depressing and David over here encouraging her to just pack up and hit the road. Like it's that easy. But Pearl feels a major responsibility for her parents, especially her father, since he cannot care for himself whatsoever. Pearl following that up by muttering, if only they could just die. Because, Pearl's Southern. My Southern accent needs a little bit of adjustment. And after hearing that, David's a little taken aback, like, pardon? But Pearl just brushes it off, like, oh, nothing. After a little more supportive, hopeful chatter of a better life and future escape, Pearl heads back home to her favorite place on the earth. And that next morning, Pearl decides to wheel her father out for a brief little stroll. A little stroll to the dock that overlooks the lake, housing her little buddy Theta, right as said crocodilian pal comes creeping over. And if it wasn't clear before, I hate crocodiles. I despise crocodiles. Pearl pushes her dad's wheelchair closer to the dock edge, closer to Theta, our lovely little friend Theta, who I personally just adore, telling her dad that she's gonna be leaving soon and that she would feel better if she felt like she wasn't abandoning him, saying, I love you, Daddy, but this is no way to live. But right as Theta is about to creep its way, or her way, whatever, up to the dock, Pearl's mother arrives on scene, having had glimpsed Pearl take her father out just earlier. And although her mother's a little suspicious as to what's going on here, Pearl feigns innocence, Pearl saying that she was just talking with Daddy. But her apprehensive mother kind of steps in and wheels the father back to the house. Thank goodness. At dinner that night, Pearl's mother reveals that she's found the flyer or pamphlet from the showing that Pearl watched down at the picture show at the theater in town, of those dancing girls. And the mother over here is not too damn pleased. And since her mother's already pissed, Pearl just decides to rip the band-aid right off and tells her outright that she's going in for a dance audition that next day, Saturday. And now her mother is even less pleased, if that's possible. The mother then rips into Pearl about Pearl's ingratitude and the life they provided for Pearl out here, and that Pearl doesn't appreciate all the mother's hard work, and that she thinks she's too good for the family. And Pearl rebuts that she needs to at least try this audition, and if she fails and doesn't get the part, then she promises she'll never bring it up again, she'll never speak about it. Pearl is just desperate as hell. But her mother's not hearing it and not having it, continuing her tension-thick fear-mongering and guilt-tripping and outright refusal for this sinful behavior. At this point, her mother has gotten very passionate about it and has started yelling at Pearl, telling her she sees an evil growing in her. Because, yes, dancing is of the devil, right? And then her mother spirals into full-on scream, rant, vent mode, pulling out a full dramatization of the situation, and hella gaslighting Pearl and accusing her of wanting her parents, who worked so hard for her, out of her life. Equating that to Pearl pretty much wanting her parents dead. Her mother continuing to scream in a German accent, which makes it 1,000 times scarier. That her own life is miserable as hell and chock full of regrets, and that the mother wants out of her own dismal life as much as Pearl wants out of it, but she has to suck it up, so does Pearl. The raging storm in the background, a paid actor. And after her mother has finished her shrieking, yelling monologue, Pearl is taken aback and stunned speechless. The poor dad who just witnessed that all, looking all sorts of unsettled. Her mother concluding her beratement with a stony face. If you want to leave, go. But when you fail, and you will fail, not very motherly, you'll know what it feels like every time I look at you. Oh. Cutting a little deep there, mother dear. Damn. But accordingly, Pearl responds with her own harshness, saying, my worst fears to end up just like you. So after an enraged slap-off where they're slapping each other straight across the face, it then spirals into a heated scuffle in which the mother's dress accidentally dips into the fireplace and catches fire, her mother quickly going up in a blaze. So Pearl is obviously freaked out by that and looks around the room, and the only water she can spot is the boiling corn water that they were gonna have with their dinner. Pearl dumping it all over her Human Torch mother and extinguishing the flame, as the father just has to sit by and watch in frozen terror. But her mother is already severely burnt and injured. Anyway, shirt check. Just kidding. But not. And then because Pearl and her mother have the sweetest mother-daughter relationship in existence, Pearl drags her mother's semi-conscious, hella injured body down the stairs to the basement or root cellar, her head bonking along every step, before Pearl rushes back upstairs to her terrified father, Pearl dashing outside into the storm and getting on her bike and beelining back toward the town, and straight to David's house, or back room, for an emotion-laden smooch. As you do. I'm sure that's everyone's first thought after watching their mom burn alive, right? Pearl wakes up early that next morning next to David in his bed, obviously forgetting that quirky little fact that, she's married, jumping out of bed and quickly getting redressed because she needs to go and practice that routine of hers. Because despite the jarring, literally scarring events of last night, today's Saturday, the big day, audition day, ooh. So then David drives her home, the farm contrastingly bright and pretty, despite last night's dark and ugly sequence of events. And as David is unloading her bike from the back of his car, Pearl hurries inside, expectedly finding her poor traumatized dad right where she left him, still slumped at the dinner table. Oh, poor guy. She then quickly wheels him into his bedroom, promising him that she'll get him cleaned up soon, before promptly giving him his medicine. While David waits for her outside, noticing the roasted, rotting, maggot-ridden pig that's sitting on the porch from days prior. So David's a tad sussed out, a little weirded out, when Pearl invites him inside finally, introducing him to her poor father who just had the night from hell. But he's a little unsettled at the same time and is kind of getting tense or suspicious vibes. He's sensing something is off. And when she hurries him upstairs to her bedroom for a quick makeout sesh, one, he's too distracted and off-put to get into. He hears a repeated bumping or thudding sound coming from downstairs, a noise that Pearl is trying hard to ignore. But David can't ignore it and pushes her off and admonishes her that, that could be your father, for crying out loud, Pearl. To Pearl's discontentment, David heads downstairs to investigate the noise, following the sound of the distant sporadic thuds into the kitchen, where he comes across the mess from last night's kerfuffle. And this only feeds the unease that's growing by the second. Pearl then jump scares him to say that, oh, that thumping and thudding, that's just a dog. It made a mess at the kitchen last night, so we locked it in the root cellar. It's nothing, David, come on. rushing it all off to excitedly tow David out of the house and toward the barn so she can show David all her animals. But David is still over here perturbed and a little more than wary at this point. After Pearl finishes obliviously introducing all her animals by name, David then asks her the name of her dog, to which she responds, "We don't have a dog." Sus as hell. Sus as hell. If you're gonna lie, Pearl, keep track of your damn lies, right? So David's now caught her in this lie that she fails to lie her way out of. So right then, David's kind of like, "Whoa, look at the time. I better be off to screen the matinee. I gotta go. Duty calls." But Pearl is starting to suspect that something is up, asking him if she did something wrong. And David responds with a forcibly confused, pretty unconvincing, "No." And he continues trying to act subtle and dodge her suspicions, but Pearl ain't buying and knows he's lying. Ooh. Dr. Seuss who? Because she, quote, feels things very deeply. And by this point, David's over the melodramatic charade that's going on between them, turning to leave once again before Pearl stops him, demanding to know what she did wrong, breaking into a mentally unstable scream fest at him while he tries to calm her down and talk her down out of her rage fit, finally admitting that he wants to leave because, "Pearl, you're scaring me." And he kind of has a transatlantic accent, but I cannot pull that off. I can barely pull off country, so bear with me. And after he says that, Pearl is stunned into sullen quiet, like David wishing her luck on her audition before dipping out toward his car. But Pearl is not having it. Grabbing a pitchfork and sneaking out of the barn after him, outside of his awareness, jump scaring him right as he starts his car engine, screaming in his face that he is not gonna leave her there! She is not staying on this farm! Before jamming the pitchfork into his chest. And after another stab, he hits the gas, or kind of, making one hell of a slow escape attempt as he is actively bleeding out and dying, putting along until he eventually keels over at the wheel and his car rolls to a stop, and frickin' Pearl's in the distance behind him screaming him and following after him, making her way over to him as she screams in his beautiful dying face, as she yanks him out of the car and to the ground, as she lifts the pitchfork up overhead and stabs it straight through his mouth, killing him. And let me just tell you, the first time I saw that, I was about to shut the movie off for real. And then after killing David, killing Superman himself, Pearl heads back to the house to her father, taking him up to the bathroom to get him cleaned up at long last. And then after giving him a sponge bath, she heads upstairs to get all primped and pretty for her upcoming audition, because it's any minute now. Like a true psychopath. All glitzed and glammed up in a red dress with a little suitcase, before grabbing a pillowcase from the nearby bed and traipsing over to her now teary-eyed father. Oh, that poor guy, oh my gosh. She then proceeds to give him a kiss on the cheek, tell him that he's loved, before then mercilessly suffocating him to death, right in front of the bird too. And after she's done the deed and killed her poor father, she then heads back outside and rolls David and his car into the lake. And Mans over here deserved way more than becoming a snack for stupid Theta over here. Oh my gosh. Yet another reason to despise crocodiles. I mean, this one is literally going to eat Superman. Like, hello? And notice Leroy's glam. He's got some pearls here. So do I. We're very on brand today. I think there's a few pearls on Clyde's necklace as well. And after all that, Pearl just nonchalantly gets on her bike, straps the little suitcase to the back, and then pedals off toward her audition, her long-awaited destiny, without a single care in the world, despite all the havoc she just caused, and the fact that she just killed David. And her mom and dad, but David. And when Pearl arrives to the audition, she sits down next to Mitzi in the seat that Mitzi saved for her, as if everything is fine and absolutely fabulously dandy, as if she didn't just kill and maim 3 people. And Mitzi's there, a nervous wreck, while Pearl is just sitting there stone-faced, stewing in her delusional, determined juices. Stewing even harder when Mitzi tells her that they might only be picking one girl. Pearl's stoic, determined response being, "It has to be me." And Mitzi's a little off-put by that, because, Mitzi's auditioning too. But Pearl is completely locked in. After a tense wait in the ever-diminishing line, girl after girl leaving the building in tears, Mitzi eventually gets next up, but her nerves are too ferocious, and So Mitzi pleads with Pearl to switch seats with her, so Pearl goes first, and Of course, Pearl complies, because Pearl is a star, and she is far more sure of herself than Mitzi is. And before she knows it, Pearl is called to go in, Pearl heading inside to achieve her long-awaited success and her inevitable stardom. Pearl heading on stage with the weight of her future hanging on her murderous shoulders, completely locked in. Oh my gosh. And when the piano takes off, so does Pearl, dancing her evil, shriveled heart out in a kind of goofy, cartoony manner. Her choreography and execution leaving much to be desired, to say the least. But because Pearl is a bona fide star in her own mind, in her own Delulu world, she gets hella into it, envisioning herself performing on an actual production with a group of background dancers, eating up every second of the moment she's been dreaming of, but leaving one hell of a lot of crumbs. After a dramatic finish and triumphant ending pose, Pearl's met with a quick, resolute response from the judge panel. Thank you, but it's gonna be a no. And Pearl can barely process the word. That word is not in her vocabulary in this context, replying with a disbelieving, pardon? And after the judges double down on that firm no, telling her she just doesn't have the look or the X factor, Pearl starts breaking the hell down. Because there's just no way that Pearl, actor, dancer extraordinaire who's just oozing with star power, just got a no. No way. No way. And as a woman attempts to usher Pearl from the stage, because, get out, you're rejected, Pearl now sees her mother, father, David, and Howard in place of the judges at the judge panel, and she begins begging and pleading for one more chance. Please, please! Before bursting out her notorious and well-known line, "Please, I'm a star!" Resulting in her having to get dragged off the stage. I mean, the whole situation kind of sucks, and this was truly her last-ditch effort, but she deserves to fail after all she's done, really. She subsequently heads outside to, understandably scream and sob. Mitzi heading out back to see her after finishing her own audition, taking a soul-racked and absolutely devastated Pearl back to her farm home. Upon arrival, Mitzi notices the roasted pig that her mother graciously gifted them several days prior. Red flag! Pearl ambling inside to go and mope at the kitchen table, as Mitzi goes about getting them both something to drink. After Mitzi sits down at the table across from Pearl and, tries to raise her spirits a bit, Pearl murmurs to Mitzi that there may be something wrong with me. Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Her 3 victims can attest to that. Plus all the other geese and whatnot she's killed and fed to Theta over there. And with a little friendly, lighthearted prodding from Mitzi, telling Pearl to pretend that Mitzi is Howard and to tell her what she means by that. As if Mitzi were Howard just listening to his wife. Pearl then goes on to say to Howard how she sometimes hates him so much for leaving her there, so much that sometimes she wants him to die. To Mitzi, who is Howard's sister, but okay. Pearl is just lost in the roleplay, I guess. Pearl going on to admit to Howard how she actually has cheated on him, with David, revealing that she was also once pregnant with Howard's baby at one point, but it died, and she admits that she was very relieved when it died. And toward the end of her tear-soaked soul spilling to Howard, to poor Mitzi over there, Pearl makes vague mention of the terrible, awful, murderous things she's done, admitting that she liked how they felt at the time. Because, see, that's normal. Going on to pretty nonchalantly say how it just started with killing animals, until her recent killings of Mama and the boy from the picture house, along with her poor, undeserving father. And after her long-winded, monologued confession to Howard, to poor Mitzi. Mitzi over there is absolutely speechless and lost for words, completely flabbergasted and stunned and horrified, before Mitzi says, well, on that note, I better get going. Mama will get concerned if I'm not back home soon. Mitzi trying to fake happy her way out of the situation, we're all good, yeah. Thanks for telling me, Pearl, this is fun. I have to leave right now. And that's when Pearl tells Mitzi that she's happy that Mitzi won the audition. She deserves it. But Mitzi's over there confused because she actually didn't get the audition. She didn't win. But Pearl will not hear a word of it and will not believe anything else. Convinced Mitzi is lying to her face. So to appease Pearl and work on getting the hell out of there, Mitzi plays along and is like, yeah, I did win. Thanks, Pearl. You're so supportive. But that only ends up making Pearl angrier and even more seething with jealousy. But Mitzi plays it off cool, trying to be as nonchalant as possible about all she just heard from Pearl. promising to keep Pearl's secrets as she slowly and methodically works her way to the front door, and Mitzi manages to casually make her way outside, but just as Pearl exits the house as well and goes over to grab an axe. So facade cracked and obliterated, Mitzi makes a break for it, and in heels, screaming for help as Pearl follows after her, until, unfortunately, Mitzi trips and Pearl catches up to her, and Pearl manages to whack the axe in Mitzi's back a few times before bringing Mitzi down. Poor, sweet, well-meaning Mitzi over here, subsequently lifting up the axe to plow it down into poor Mitzi's head. And after dismembering Mitzi and throwing her into the lake for some bite-sized snacks for Theta, yay! Yay, Theta! Pearl heads back down to the basement, realizing that her mother is actually still alive. So it's been like a whole day of agony for her mother. Pearl wrapping herself in her mother's arms. Like a true psychopath, I guess. Thereafter propping her parents' dead bodies at the dinner table, set for a fine dining dinner feast of that rotted, maggot-ridden pig. Grubs up! And then not too long afterwards, Howard actually returns from military service, dropped off at Pearl's house so he can finally see his long-awaited wife, instead walking in to witness the horror scene and the horror feast right before him. Pearl noticing him from the adjoining room, stunned to see him, and telling him how happy she is that he's finally home. Oh, Howard. Pearl rigging up the creepiest, most beaming of heinous smiles right as the movie rolls into credits. And Pearl maintains that hideously creepy, psychotic smile as the entire credits roll. That smile only getting more unhinged and insane by the second. And that smile goes on forever. So power to Mia Goth, the actress, because just watching that made my face hurt. And thus it ends. Thus ends the movie Pearl. And I'm actually a big fan of this movie. I really liked this movie. It's so good, it's so eerie, it's so well acted. It's such a fascinating guttural experience. And Mia Goth absolutely slays as Pearl. Fantastic performance. And everyone in this movie is just so perfect for their roles, and the roles are all so perfectly executed. And David over here looks good as hell. He looks great in that time period attire. So please, go and watch Pearl for yourself, and let me know what you thought. It's one roller coaster of a movie and one doozy of a ride, but absolutely worth watching every second of it, okay? Go and do it. And, make sure you drink enough water today, Pookie.